It is Wednesday, June 4th, and former White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, Biden's press secretary, doing the unthinkable, out-grifting the ultimate grifter, Jake Tapper, releasing her own tell-all book about Joe Biden. And get this, the arc of the story, leaving the Democrat Party. Also, California Congressman Eric Swalwell finally addressing his relationship with Fang Fang. You won't believe his excuse. We'll show you that. And President Trump speaking with Vladimir Putin this morning, making a big prediction on what we're about to see or not see in Ukraine. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates.
It would seem that people in this White House knew that President Biden was slipping, and it was hidden from the American people. So who ordered White House officials to cover up a declining president?
I know that that is a narrative that you love. And no, wait.
10 days. He did a press conference at NATO. I'm in it. There's all these things that I need to finish. And then 10 days later, I'm dropping out.
Okay. Wait, okay, you're asking me like multiple questions here. Wait. First of all, there's been no cover-up. Want to be very clear about that. I know that's the narrative that you all wait, no, you can't.
Can you say whether or not you'd be willing to have the president's doctor come to the podium, particularly given that the president does intend to serve out his term, and there have been a number of questions about, his fitness for office. Some of those questions could be settled if perhaps there's his doctor would come to the podium, or if more medical records could be released.
You heard from the president's doctor, I believe, every day that he had COVID. He gave his assessment of what was going on, what was happening.
So after years of lying to the American people from the White House press podium, the chief mouthpiece for the Biden administration, Biden's White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, probably the worst press secretary in living memory, doing the unthinkable, managing to outgrift even Jake Tapper, the ultimate media grifter, deciding to write her own tell-all book about the inner workings of Biden world and what it was really like working for a president everyone knew was checked out. And the arc of the story, the arc of the book is Karine Jean-Pierre revealing she's switching parties, leaving the Democrat Party. It's all way too much. Coming out, as she calls, an independent, saying she's done with the Democrat Party. And we had some hints about this. We had some hints this was coming. Here she was in February, ripping the Democratic machine for turning on her boss. Roll the tape.
Personally, I think what was the toughest thing to see in the 3 weeks was there was a disconnect for me. What was happening with leadership in the Democratic Party and how it was truly, as my former colleague, communications director Ben LeBolt said, it was a firing squad. And I had never seen anything like it before. I'd never seen a party do that. And I was shocked by what I was seeing.
And Karine, just to clarify, these are other Democrats and Democratic leadership coming out against Biden.
Yep, I had never seen anything like that. That was, if you're asking me, the thing that I saw in those 3 weeks, that was shocking. Shocking.
The Hatchet Book Group writing a review for Karine's new book, describing it and saying, in a hard-hitting yet hopeful critique, Jean-Pierre defines what it means to be part of a growing percentage of our fractured electorate that is actually independent. Why it can be worthwhile to carve out your own political space more loyal to personal beliefs than a party affiliation, and what questions you need to ask yourself to determine where you fit politically. So let me get this straight. After spending years lying to our faces about Biden being the sharpest and hardest working president in history, when it really counted, right? When she was working for us, when she was being paid by the taxpayer, she had no problem lying. But now that the jig is up, she decides, hey, why not sell a book? This is the same lady who called videos showing Biden's decline, his cognitive decline. She told us from the White House press podium they were cheap fakes and mis and disinformation, dangerous, misinformation, saying there's anything noticeably wrong with Joe Biden. Doing this from the White House press briefing room. Karine Jean-Pierre was the mouthpiece for the Biden health cover-up. Watch.
There seems to be a sort of rash of videos that have been edited to make the president appear especially frail or mentally confused. I'm wondering if the White House is especially worried about the fact that this appears to be a pattern that we're seeing more and more.
Yeah, and I think you all have called this the cheap fakes video, and that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith, and some of your news organization have been very clear, have stressed that these the right wing critics of the president have a credibility problem because of the fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation, disinformation, and so we see this, and this is something coming from your part of the world, calling them cheap fakes and misinformation. And I'll quote the Washington Post, where they wrote about this, and they said how Republicans use misleading videos to attack Biden in a 24-hour period. And to their credit, we have a conservative Washington Examiner did call them out as well, calling out the New York Post. Ironically, several recent cheap fakes actually attacked the president for thanking troops. That is what they're attacking the president for. Both in Normandy, this happened, and again in Italy. And I think that it tells you everything that we need to know about how desperate Republicans are here. And instead of talking about the president's performance in office, and what I mean by that is his legislative wins, what he's been able to do for the American people across the country, we're seeing these deep fakes. These manipulated videos. And it is, again, done in bad faith.
In another story, keeping in line with the blatant hypocrisy of the Democrat Party, California Congressman Eric Swalwell finally addressing the elephant in the room, the Fang Fang controversy, where he allegedly had a relationship with a Chinese spy, going on the Breakfast Club podcast, spending his time with Charlemagne the God, ripping Donald Trump, until he was asked about Fang Fang, which, if you're not familiar with the story, the FBI warned Eric Swalwell 5 years ago about this lady's ties to the CCP. Tons of reporting on this after a year-long investigation found that Ms. Fang, posing as a Democrat fundraiser and befriending Eric Swalwell. It turns out she was actually a Chinese spy. Swalwell, the Daily Mail saying, refusing to say if he was with Fang Fang, claiming it's a matter of national security that he not share more details of their relationships. So yeah, for years, Eric Swalwell was asked about this, to give his side of the story, and rarely ever commented on it until now, this morning on the Breakfast Club podcast, Charlemagne the God asking him, and you won't believe his answer, saying, in fact, he's proud that Republicans make fun of him for being with a Chinese spy, saying they're just mad because he's a straight, white, Christian male. What? Yes, that's what he said. Roll the tape.
Did the Chinese spy scandal hurt your credibility, or did Republicans just weaponize like a nothing burger, so to speak?
You know, the fact that the FBI and the House Ethics Committee said it was bullshit, like I would hope that would be enough, but like in a disinformation society, like I recognize that it's everyone on the right's favorite meme. My wife tells me all the time, you know what? The second they're not going after you, you're not effective. And so I wear it as a badge of honor that these guys would want to lie about me all the time, because I think it means that I'm landing punches politically on them that sting. And frankly, I think a lot of Republicans look at me as like, oh, that's a straight, white, Christian male, son of a cop. Like everyone else like him looks like me. So when he comes at me, it's more betrayal to them. Like I've heard that from them on their side, that's why they take it so personally. So I'm not going away, and they can say what they want, and the death threats will come. But if they think I'm going to drop my lawsuit from January 6th against the president, or if I regret being an impeachment manager, or if I'm not going to like go out and work my ass off to help us win the midterms, like they're wrong. Like I'm not going away. I came from nothing. I was raised by a cop who did the right thing. Like, to me, I'm playing with the house's money, so to speak. And so this is just a right or wrong mission for me.
You get a lot of
In another story, President Trump making news this morning after wrapping up his hour and 15-minute call with Vladimir Putin, predicting on Truth Social after the call that he does not believe a peace deal will happen in the near future, writing, "I just finished speaking by telephone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. The call lasting approximately an hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace." President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. Yeah. You think the attack Putin's talking about is what Ukraine called Operation Spiderweb. It just happened last weekend. A sophisticated covert military op where they smuggled hundreds of drones into Russia months ago. 18 months ago, they smuggled these drones in over the Russian border in the floor of log cabins, which they hauled via tractor trailers. The cabins were then delivered to property near Russia's most sensitive military installation, sitting there for 18 months, not doing anything, waiting to launch the attack until the moment peace talks were unfolding, successfully destroying a third of Russia's nuclear bomber fleet, an attack people are comparing to Pearl Harbor.
The direct peace talks came just one day after Ukraine's daring drone strike operation targeting airfields deep inside Russia. The Ukrainian president praised the brilliant operation, saying that the strikes were launched out of necessity.
We don't want to demonstrate our strength. We are demonstrating it because the enemy doesn't want to stop. We demonstrate it in a fair way on military targets. And we don't only demonstrate it to the Russian aggressors, but also to all those allies that once were strong allies and have now started doubting us. The trust towards Ukrainians and faith in Ukraine has returned.
Nick Payne-Walsh breaks down how Ukraine carried out the operation.
A bird's-eye view of humiliation. Ukrainian drones halfway across Russian Siberia, seconds from hitting the Kremlin's most prized bombers. But the data was bad for Moscow. 117 drones hitting 41 long-range bombers across Russia. Ukraine hit Irkutsk, 4,500 kilometers away from Ukraine, where Google Earth still shows similar propeller-driven aircraft in the open. But they also struck Alenia, right on the Arctic Circle. Similar planes also on Google. Another example of something that just was not meant to happen in Russia's brutal war of choice. For how was as extraordinary.
Cedric, just your reaction when you heard, this is estimates of some $7 billion in unrecoverable damage to these Tupolev bombers that predate Russian independence. This was really the Soviet aircraft that were targeted. Ukraine says as many as 40. That number may be in question, but Russia didn't have more than 100. And the significance here is that these were capable of carrying out long-range ballistic missile attacks into Ukraine. How big of a setback is this for Russia?
Well, this could be a huge setback for Russia, Brianna, and one of the key things about this is that the mechanisms that, we'll call them mechanisms for a second here, these aircraft that the Ukrainians hit, the Tupolev 95 and 22 aircraft, they are not only the aircraft that were used to attack Ukraine using cruise missiles, but they're also part of the nuclear deterrent that the Soviet Union and then Russia created. Not only for the Cold War, but in the post-Cold War period. And that's a significant thing because basically what the Ukrainians have done is taken out probably about a third or so of those aircraft from the Russian inventory. And that makes it very hard for the Russians to continue to prosecute the war like they did. And the one other thing that they did was they took out an A-50, which is a so-called mainstay aircraft. That's an AWACS-like aircraft. That means command and control. So now command and control is much more difficult for the Russians to exercise while they attack Ukrainian targets. So this is a very significant development.
Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Should Trump at this point just walk away? pull all support from Ukraine and completely walk away. It's clear Zelensky has no interest in settling this diplomatically. Let me know what you think. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.